It's time for Tycoons of Small Biz, spotlighting the true backbone of the American economy, the true tycoons of business in America, the owners, founders, and CEOs of small businesses. The show's hosts, Austin Peterson and Landon Mance, are registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation, a broker-dealer member SIPC, and registered investment advisor. The views expressed by your hosts, Austin and Landon, are not necessarily the views of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Let's lean in as Austin and Landon connect with this week's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's special Veterans Day edition of Tycoons of Small Biz. We are excited to have in studio today Adam Jackson, founder and CEO of 360 Privacy. I'm Austin Peterson, as usual, and my Dwight Schrute, if you will, assistant to the regional manager, Landon Mance, is here as well. Landon, as always, thanks for being here. I couldn't resist. I had to throw that one in there.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Adam, we are so excited to have you in studio. I want to take a quick second and just kind of recognize, I mentioned this is the Veterans Day episode. We want to dedicate this episode to all members of the military, but for me especially, I want to dedicate this to my brother that's a year younger than me, who is, I was almost going to say was a Marine, but you know the drill, once a Marine, always a Marine. He and I took two different paths to the same outcome. The reality is he went into the military and I went and did some missionary service for our church when we were both about the same age. And I remember very vividly a letter coming in, and Landon, a letter is what we did before emailing, a letter coming in to me in Belgium that said, "Can you tell Mom that it's okay for me to join the Marines?" And, it kind of just, I was the older brother and my mom was scared to death about him joining the military. But the reality is I learned in those 2 years when I served abroad so much that made me who I am today, and the same thing for him in the military that made him who he is today. And really what it leads us to is husbands and fathers that love God and love country and take care of our families and teach them the importance of faith. And so we took two different paths to get there, but we're both at that spot today. And I couldn't be prouder to have him as my younger brother, and couldn't be prouder to have you in today for our Veterans Day edition.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. It's definitely great to know there's that kind of support out there.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate your service and everything that you've done for our country. And so, I'm excited to learn a little bit about your business, but we always start by having our guests tell us a little about themselves personally. So we'd love to hear kind of your story, how you got to where you are today, if you're married, if you have kids, those sorts of things, and then we'll kick off the show from there.
Yeah, so I grew up one of 6 kids in southern Indiana, small town. It's probably 20,000 people. Did all the normal small town stuff, played sports, got into a lot of trouble as a kid. Ended up joining I did 1 year of college and, couldn't really figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I ended up joining the Army at 19, did some time in the infantry with the 82nd Airborne. And then from there, went through the Special Forces qualification course and finished out my career there. I did a trip to Afghanistan and then one trip to Jordan and then a deployment to kind of a combined trip to Iraq and Syria.
Very cool. Very cool. And when did you get out of the military? And
so I got out of the military in 2017, early 2017. Kind of decided I wanted to get into the computer vision space and some of the machine learning stuff that was going on at the time. So I started digging into that and built a platform to previously identified bad actors trying to enter schools and churches or like VIP sections of big tours or things like that. Ended up running into some regulatory issues with the state of Tennessee. They classified that business as an alarm system. And so they basically said I had to go through the process of like doing what an ADT or somebody like that would do to install this artificial intelligence system. While that was playing out, I ended up pitching the product to Jason Aldean's camp in 2017. So Jason was, and that was August of 2017. Jason was standing on stage October 1st, 2017 at the mass shooting in Las Vegas. And so his tour manager remembered this former special forces guy that was good at computers, and they needed to revamp their security posture. And so I ended up riding on a bus for a while with Jason and kind of helping out his tour and looking at, different ways of approaching security for a big organization like that. I guess during that process, I got to meet a lot of country musicians that had issues with cyber stalkers and very real issues of kids getting texted, accounts being taken over. In one case, somebody's banking information was stolen. They lost access to all their social media accounts. And so I ended up getting to talk to a few of these stalkers. And so one of the most interesting experiences of my life was sitting down with these people that had wreaked chaos on these artists and interviewing them and figuring out what made them tick and why they did the things they did and how they did it. None of them were programmers. None of them were hackers. They just found personal information on the internet and were able to just wreak havoc with that information. So I'll stop here for a second and just see if you guys have any questions on the little, spiel I just did, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously you're talking about the groundwork of kind of how you were led to where you are today in founding the business. But before we went on air, we talked a little bit about this documentary that's out called The Social Dilemma, right? And the things that you're talking about kind of make me think of some of the things that I saw on that. And so obviously, if you or any of our listeners haven't seen that documentary, I recommend watching it and understanding exactly what kind of data is behind this and what they're doing with our data, which ultimately I think is kind of what led you to take this to the next level, right? I mean, this wasn't, in the conversation we had a few weeks ago before we had you come on the show, we talked about how you didn't anticipate starting this business. It just kind of worked its way into this business. And now I feel like you're providing a service specifically to people who have really high profiles, this protection that they need, right?
So yeah, I never intended for this to be a business. What ended up happening is I talked to one of these stalkers who walked me through the entire process she went through just to get the cell phone numbers of this country megastar and his wife and his kids' phone numbers, and how she was able to break into his banking and how she was able to take over social media. And what it really amounted to was she got on Spokio.com, looked at the street he grew up on, his mother's maiden name, his high school mascot, all that kind of stuff, and was able to answer his security questions on his email account. And once she had access to the email account, she was able to get everything. And she reset all of his passwords, took over several million social media followers, had full control of all of his finances. And this girl was doing this from a Chromebook in a trailer. She wasn't some educated hacker that did all this. And so I built a list of these sites that offered that kind of information, and I knocked all of the existing clients off of those sites. And within a month, all of the data had just repopulated. Every time somebody opens a new shopper loyalty card or signs up at a gym and gives their address and phone number, all of that information is being bundled and sold constantly. And every time you have one of those new transactions, a new profile pops up somewhere online. And so we ended up having to build some algorithms and bots to go out and search for that data. I still at that point didn't think it was a business until we looked up and had more clients than I could service by myself, and kind of started running from there.
Adam, I got a question for you, and I apologize if I asked this question in a couple of different ways throughout the interview, but obviously your time spent in the military, you've got I assume some pretty unique skill sets. And you talk about interviewing these not hackers, but these stalkers, these creeps. So how do your skills from being in the military, how do you kind of translate that over to interviewing these people to extract the information that you're looking to get from them?
So, I mean, people are people in general, and so there are some similarities, but like interviewing an Arabic speaking Middle Easterner that's never been to school and might have like a flip phone it's a really different experience than interviewing somebody that is, in most cases, truly mentally ill, usually has some level of delusion tied into what they're doing, or just kind of wants to watch the world burn. So as far as like, reading body language and, knowing how to look scary at the right time, those skills transferred really well. But it was this whole new crazy dimension of just sitting down with these people that, do these things that violate the social contract and don't understand why it's wrong to do. That was a whole new and really interesting experience.
Yeah, so so you talk about looking scary at the right time. That reminds me, this happens to me. I'm sure it happens to you. Probably doesn't happen to Landon. You'll see here in a minute. But every time I go to the store, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, I go through and I'm paying, and they look at me and they say, "Are you military?" They're wanting to give me a military discount, right? And it took me a while to figure it out. And this is why I know it happens to you and probably doesn't happen to Landon. They're looking at me and they're saying, "That dude is badass," right? Like they look at me and they're like, "That guy could kill me with his pinky finger." And so I know that happens with you. Landon, we know it doesn't happen with you, right?
All right. Okay. Second blow landed. I got this. Okay. All right. Noted.
Oh man. No, I mean, I think that Landon's right though. I mean, it's obviously a very good question. And, the reality is there are skills, of course, that carry over, but I wouldn't have thought about it the way that you just mentioned it, right? Because it truly is a different scenario, whether it's, radical Islam that's trying to destroy America and wants to do that, with everything. And like you said, they don't have any of the technology. They don't have an education for the most part compared to somebody who's mentally ill. And, the way I envision it believes that, you mentioned Jason Aldean, right? So we'll use his name. Jason Aldean is meant to be her future husband, right? Like there are people who live in that delusional state. And so it's a completely different approach, of course. But, the skills I'm sure carry over. And I think it's probably enjoyable for you to work on this and to be able to put skills that you learned in the military to use in building a great company today.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest, to sum it up, the biggest difference I would say is the motivation and the level of organization of thought. And so you deal with a really smart kind of manager of other terrorists. And there's a level of organization to his thought process. There's a coherence to, his belief system is broken, but it's driving a coherent thought process. Whereas when you sit down with these kind of almost insane people, there's no organization. There isn't like the one thread that's sort of pulling the thought process across whatever finish line they're trying to get to.
Yeah. So that's basically the story on how the company got started, right?
Right.
So knowing your background in the military, I'm gonna move to this question because the military, it's always about the team, right? So
Yeah.
we'll come back and we'll talk about your competition and what makes you guys unique. But tell us a little bit about your team. We've met one member of your team, Zach, who's not able to be here today because he just had a baby. So congratulations, Zach. We hope that everything's great there, and that's way more important than being on our podcast. And what we know of Zach is he's a really, really great guy, also an ex-military guy. But tell us about the team and tell us what they do for your company today and what makes you guys successful.
Yeah, so the core of our company is former special operations guys. We're branching away from that because it turns out that like Green Berets aren't great at like client services and answering customer complaints and things like that. And so we've had to fill those roles with people that have more nurturing backgrounds than most of our team at this point. But the core of the group is former special operations, and it's been really fun to try to translate the culture of a team room to, in the Army at Fort Campbell, to a tech company in like East Nashville, where we've got like, just a whole different operating environment, but trying to translate the same culture has been honestly, it's been really fun to go through that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, that's one. It's a big struggle that small businesses have, and trying to put together a team and keep that culture and keep everybody rowing in the same direction is not an easy thing to do, right? And like you said, you've kind of already identified that Green Beret or Special Ops are not typically the best client service associates inside of an organization. So you're learning some lessons along the way, but it's so it reminds me of a guy that's in a Vistage group of mine who's also former military, and he's very just straightforward, very direct kind of a guy, right? Which most military guys are. But he's built a great organization because he does understand how to get a team behind what it is that he's doing, right? So talk to us a little bit about how you bring that military aspect of, getting a team all going in the same direction, having a mission and accomplishing that mission. And how do you translate that to 360 privacy?
So I'd say the first thing is picking the right team. It's really easy to get people motivated. They're already motivated people, and people that are mission driven are always going to get behind the mission as long as it's articulated to them why it's an important mission and they understand it and believe in it. And so the first thing we do is we have sort of a unique interview process. Now, I don't know how the interview process scales, but it's, come to the office and hang out for a little bit before we ever, go into a room and sit down with our HR checklist and all that good stuff. The biggest challenge we have as far as picking people for our team is bringing people in that understand the really unique environment where, it wouldn't be uncommon for, voices to get raised. And, that's just sort of the environment we all grew up in, of really direct communication and very feedback that's more intense than what most people are used to. And again, in the world that most of us came from, that's fine. An hour later, everybody's great. In the world that a lot of 24-year-olds are used to today, that is a crushing, traumatizing experience. And so making sure that we're bringing people in that fit the culture is the first step. The other is, I think the mission that we are on is pretty easy to articulate and for people to get behind, right? Like, we're making sure that really bad people can't find people on the internet. And it's not like we're, selling widgets from a company to a consumer, and, it's a supply chain play. Our mission is not really hard to get big groups of people behind.
No, I think that's cool. Well, Landon, you want to jump in? You kind of raised your head like you were going to say something.
No, well, yeah, I was, but I lost my train of thought. So I guess I feel like I have several questions, but the one that I want to just kind of address, because it's pertinent to what you're talking about right now, is, being that you put together this team, maybe it's a fair statement to say mostly former military guys and gals, but also some non-military, ex-military people. How does having that group, how would you say that kind of helps to set your company apart, from the competition that may not have a team with similar backgrounds to you?
I'd say the first is just having a really mission-driven environment where the most important thing in our office every day is the mission that we're trying to accomplish. So an example of that is a couple of weeks ago, we had a surge of enrollment. So we had a bunch of clients coming in one day, required a lot of processing. There was never a conversation about, hey guys, we're all going to stay until 9 tonight because, this is what we have to get done. The job wasn't done, so everybody just stayed. There was no manager driving that. There was no internal meeting to discuss staying late and approving overtime. It was just something that needed to happen, so it happened. And so I think that's probably the biggest benefit. The other is the ability to give that direct feedback without having to have 7 or 8 meetings to make sure that the feedback was received and that, HR filled out the right forms to, allow an employee improvement program or something along those lines. Just being able to communicate as directly as we communicate just cuts out so much time from the normal process. And then maybe this actually might be the biggest thing is everybody that's providing our product on our customers or on our services team has gone overseas and been really worried that some bad actor was going to get on one of the sites that we deal with and find their family back home. And so they truly understand the fear the client has when they come to us and ask us to start removing their personal information from a bunch of different sources.
Understood. I can't relate to that, but yeah, I can certainly imagine. So you said that the mission of the company is essentially to remove information online so bad people don't find it. So talk to us a little bit more about that. Like what is it that you guys are actually doing on a day-to-day basis to achieve, your mission?
Yeah, so we'll define the problem set a little bit more just so people understand what is actually out there about them. There are about 25 sites that will sell the first 5 digits of your social security number, of anybody's social security number in America. And the only bar that somebody has to hurdle to get that information is having a credit card. They don't need to be a PI. They don't need to be law enforcement. They just have to sign up, and then they search your name, and they have the first 5 digits of your social security number, your home phone number, your home address, your cell phone number, and a whole list of your relatives. In reality, if we were to, have a breach and that information were to go out in the public, that would be considered a very major hack, right? That's something we would have to alert all of our clients about. We'd have to provide identity protection. But these sites just sell it without any, there's no recourse for anybody. So what we do is, in some cases, we will just we'll go through the prescribed opt-out process on the site. A lot of sites have just a click here to remove your information. About 2/3 have that. The other third, there's some sort of creative process that we've either establish a relationship with a company or through some other means are able to get them to suppress the information so that when somebody comes to the site and searches for our clients, they're not able to find their personal information. And
so,
then
go ahead.
On the back side of that, there's a daily scan that happens for all of our clients to make sure that their information isn't being repopulated because they re-registered their car or renewed their driver's license, or in some cases even just paid a water bill.
So these companies that that provide this service, is that legal for them to be selling this information like this?
It shouldn't be, but it is. So the rules are, the problem is, or the fundamental problem is America views public records as being owned by the public. And so the government can't suppress somebody's right to use or access something that they own. And so these sites are operating under that law. And so it is legal at this point to sell somebody's social security number on the internet as long as you just call yourself a data aggregation site and wave the First Amendment flag.
Interesting. Unfortunate, but interesting. Oh, yeah. So as you mentioned, someone getting their car registered or doing some other task like that may populate your public information. So I guess as somebody that is not familiar with, the celebrity world and the inner workings of all their stuff. So you're telling me that, a big name celebrity, I mean, they still have to register their car at the DMV just like you or I do?
So it's interesting. Some do, some have an accountant do it and it's registered at their business manager's office, or in some cases their family office, or whatever the case may be. The problem is, even using a house as an example, even if you buy a house in an LLC and a trust owns that LLC, and you put all these layers of protection in place. We just had a client who the only place she had ever used her real address was when she signed up for workouts at Orange Theory Fitness. And so we're almost positive that we can track 280 sites populating her home address back to Orange Theory Fitness. And so even if you have all the sophisticated measures in place, the life practices that would go into keeping your information off of these sites are so cumbersome that most people just can't keep up with them.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, what I think of is first, it's kind of unfortunate that your company even needs to exist, right? Because the reality is that information shouldn't be out there. It shouldn't be accessible, right? And I get the celebrity side of things, and they probably need it more than Landon or I, or our normal day-to-day people, right? Johnny Lunchbucket or whoever it is. But you mentioned guys that you served with that worry about bad actors finding out where they live, right? And although I never served in the military, obviously my brother did, but a good personal friend of mine that I was a missionary with from 1996 to 1998 was in the military afterwards. He's a West Point grad, and he retired from the military as one of the top snipers in all four branches of the military. He had all these confirmed kills and a bounty on his head from Al-Qaeda. So that makes me think, he legitimately had something to worry about there. And so I kind of wonder if part of your plan going forward is to put together some sort of a service that could be to the masses, right? So military would still be considered the masses. These are not people who can afford to put together and pay for a top of the line service like you're providing right now. Any chances that you're going that direction in the future, some sort of a contract with the military or for people like us?
Yeah. So to say, let's start kind of back at the starting point. The only reason our price points are so high is because the service costs so much to provide at this point. These sites put in all sorts of protective measures to make sure that this process can't be automated, or it's extremely hard to automate. New sites pop up constantly, and so the cost of supplying a service like this is pretty high. And as far as a mass service offering, I think that's something that we're talking about doing internally right now. But the mechanics of that would actually be a pretty heavy technological lift.
Yeah, I mean, so you hear commercials for companies who claim to be doing something similar, but it must be at a much lower scale than what you're talking about.
Yes, so we have two competitors. One covers about 70 sites. The other covers, I think they're up to like 100 now. And the only follow-up they do is quarterly, and typically there's no intelligent part of that. It's an automated part of that. It's a human overseas that goes through and manually checks for the client's information on the 70 or 100 sites that these companies are covering.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break to hear a word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back. And I'm just so intrigued by this whole process, and it scares me to death knowing how much of my information's out there, as well as my kids and that sort of thing. So let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk some more, if that's all right.
Whether you're an established local company or a brand new startup, you can count on GBS to be part of your family. We're not just any benefits consulting firm, we're GBS. We have nearly 30 years of experience in group benefits, a strong sense of purpose, and it shows. GBS, believe in something better. gbsbenefits.com.
All right, Tycoons, welcome back to the show. We are here with Adam Jackson, founder of 360 Privacy, and we're talking about things that should make every one of us scared and nervous about the fact that our personal information is out there. So I want to jump in, actually. Landon, I don't know if you've got something you want to ask. Maybe you should ask a question here.
Yeah, so I would be curious, Adam, to know the extent of the information that is out there on us, because you talk about email and home address and phone number and stuff, but what all information is out there on any given person?
Yeah, so it depends on the level of sophistication of the person as far as the financial instruments they're using and things like that. But, so a basic rundown is almost always we will find a person's actual cell phone number, their actual home address, at least the first 5 of their social. In about 20% of cases, we'll find the entire social available and just open source. But then you get into sort of the soft identifiers. And so like, if you don't configure your Amazon wish list correctly, then it winds up on all of these aggregation sites. And I don't think we've seen an Amazon wish list yet that didn't have something that embarrassed the person whose wish list it was. Everything from the wildly inappropriate all the way to, just embarrassing books or movies or stuff like that. And so then you look at like vehicle VIN numbers, for example, and what can be done with a vehicle's VIN number. I mean, you can call a dealership with a VIN number and say, hey, this is my car. I lost my key. This is my name. Can you make a copy and I'll swing by and pick it up? In a lot of cases, you can disable a car through its OnStar system if you have a VIN number for it. And so to me, the VIN number being available, and that's sold directly from the DMV to aggregation sites or aggregation companies. Since COVID started, the amount of information we've seen and the types of information we've seen have grown almost exponentially because you have a lot of out-of-work software developers, you have a lot of companies that are trying to replace revenue streams, and it's a fast, easy way to do that.
That's crazy. So, excuse me. So Landon's Amazon wish list that has the poster in there for Miley Cyrus, #1 fan. Those are the types of embarrassing things you're talking about.
Yeah, and for Landon, that's embarrassing. His friends are going to make fun of him. But when the CEO of a Fortune 500 company has like how to stop a mental breakdown once it starts, all of a sudden you get into some very real ramifications for something that seems very innocuous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a publicly traded company, that could, kill the stock price. I mean, there's so many things that kind of go into that. That's a very good example, a real world example for sure. So what is it that gets you out of bed every morning, Adam? What excites you about what you're doing?
The fight. These sites feel like they have a right to take your private information and put it on the internet, and then make it nearly impossible for somebody to get that information off. And so, I'm still, even as the CEO of the company, I'm still involved in figuring out how to beat these sites, because that's the thing that, gets me excited is that fight with somebody that is doing something that's unjustifiable, trying to justify it, and then making it impossible for somebody to protect themselves.
Yeah. So obviously you can hear kind of the military aspect of that, right? I mean, I think it probably started early on, like you said in the beginning, with competitive sports and those sorts of things that led to the military and then special operations. And now it's, you've transitioned who your enemy is, so to speak, but you're still excited about getting up and fighting the good fight, which I think is awesome.
For sure.
I got a question for you, Adam. So, you've been in business now for a little while, and you've built this really cool, team and this really cool, service. But share with us, what have you learned about business, since you officially started the company? You've hired some people, you've built out a team, you've built up your client list. Talk to us just about what you've learned just generally, about business, and maybe some of the things that you didn't anticipate that you've had to work through, and just kind of share some of your successes and failures with us, if you don't mind.
That's a broad question. I'd say the biggest thing I probably about business in general that I've learned is, we made some changes to our team in the middle of this year, and saw results, all measurable results, whether it was revenue, quality of the product, happiness of the rest of the team, skyrocket. And that was sort of a wake-up call of, personnel management is probably the single most important function of anybody running a business. A couple of people that are in the wrong spot or in the, or just disgruntled in general can really have huge dramatic effects on the direction of a business or even its viability.
Yeah, I just finished listening to an audio book, which I highly recommend. The book is called What It Takes, and it's essentially the story of Steven Schwartzman, who is the co-founder of Blackstone, which is the largest investment company, I believe, in the world. I think they own more real estate than any other firm in the world, and they do M&A work and private equity deals, and they're investors. And I think they've got 500 billion of assets, under their management. And really great read or listen, depending on how you want to do it. But one of the points that he makes is he says that you have to hire tens, because tens will always find the answer to the problems that they are facing. And I thought that was a really good lesson. And speaking of hiring tens, my first hire, Adam, was a woman who also is a West Point grad. She served in the Army and did a couple of tours overseas. And she has been just an absolutely incredible employee. But anyway, the point I'm making is that in this book, he talks about the tens, and it sounds like you've kind of found that same concept applicable to your business, which is, and Austin has kind of spoken to this in the past, talking about, make sure that the people are on the right seats of the bus and that everyone's heading in the same direction. So it seems like you've kind of figured that out maybe with some of your recent hires.
Hopefully we'll find out. It's a little early to tell with recent hires, but we at least I think we're moving in the right direction on it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about the future. What are some of the the aspirations for you and for the firm, the next 3, 5, 10 years, or just anytime in the future? What are your plans?
Yeah, so at a really high level, running this company is still really, really fun for me right now. And the company is still growing. And as long as those two things stay true, everything else is just sort of gravy as far as, are we going to take path X or path Y? That being said, up to this point, we've been completely focused on individuals. We just rolled out a corporate pricing plan, and we've gotten some really, really good traction early on with that program. I think, we anticipate we'll increase the number of employees we have by 50% over the next probably quarter to 2 quarters. And so we're trying to really just kind of managing growth, but still having a lot of fun and making sure that growth makes it more fun. In a startup, everybody's wearing 9 hats and they don't like 2 of them. And so the way we hire is, everybody writes the hats that they don't want to wear on a whiteboard anymore. And then we go looking for somebody that wants to wear those hats. And so, as long as we manage the growth correctly, things should get more and more fun as we grow.
Yeah, it actually even goes back to the last question that Landon asked, and you talked about, adding to the team or reshuffling the team and that sort of thing. And, one thing that I always try to remember is hire slow, fire fast, right? So you got to make sure that you're getting that right person, like Landon said, on the bus and in the right seat. But if you made a mistake, don't let that mistake sit there forever. Just deal with it and move on, because it's critical to your company, and your clients come to expect excellence from you. And if you can't provide that excellence from whatever employee, then that reflects poorly on the company.
Yeah, for sure.
So This is kind of a different way of asking the same question that Landon just asked, but one of the things that we plan with our clients for all the time, and we've mentioned this multiple times on the podcast, is Stephen Covey always says, begin with the end in mind, right? And so if you had to fast forward 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, whatever it is for you that seems, your long-term goal, what is the ultimate goal for you and this company? Is this something you see doing forever? Do you plan on there being an exit and you doing something else? Kind of what are your thoughts there?
I think any company that starts out on day one saying like, we want to sell in the next 36 months, I can't imagine that ever goes well. Maybe it does on Silicon Valley, but I just can't imagine building a company with sort of that end state. So right now, what we're completely focused on, and I don't see changing anytime soon, is improving our existing products, finding a way to make people's personal information online, and finding better and innovative ways to protect people constantly. As long as we're growing, it's a viable business, and everybody involved is still having a lot of fun. That's sort of if that's my 20-year end state, I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, it's one of those things that I tell my clients too, as corny as it sounds, I put my head on my pillow at night knowing I'm doing something that makes the world better, right? And makes people's lives better. And I think it's easy for you to see that you're doing the same thing, which makes it easy to get out of bed in the morning and go and fight the good fight.
For sure.
So I've got one final question. Maybe Landon can wrap it up after that if he has another question. But the final question I have for you is, for those who are listening to the podcast today, or obviously that gets shared with your social media and what you're trying to do to grow the business, what should a potential prospect of your company know about your company that they don't know already?
That we take privacy and security, I think, more seriously than any other company that I've ever heard of. So, we don't operate in the cloud. The way we store our customer data vastly exceeds any sort of industry standard, whether it's SOC 2 or whatever certification you can have. And the other thing is that we are constantly improving our product, and that's, in this industry, that's pretty rare. Since COVID started, I think we've added 41 sites to our total list of sites that we cover, and we don't go back to a customer and say, hey, we're deleting you from 20% more sites because COVID started, and there's more information out there, so you have to pay us more. It's just that gets added to the list. We have a big day where we go back and delete all of our clients from those sites, and then we move on. But our product is constantly iterating, and the people that are looking out for you, all of a sudden you go from this huge, expansive problem to having like a team of former special operations guys and cyber experts working to make sure that your information can't be found online.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You got a great story. I don't have any further questions for you. I just want to share something with you. Austin and I we've communicated this to you prior to today, but we are huge supporters of our servicemen and women, and so we just want to say thank you very much for your service. We certainly wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. And before you share with our listeners and everybody where they can track you down, I just want to tell you that Austin and I, we're going to make $100 contribution to the Gary Sinise Foundation. Adam, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but that's a foundation that myself and my family have been donating to for a number of years, and he does some incredible work for ex-military people. So we're going to make a $100 donation to that foundation, just as a show of our appreciation to you and all the other men and women that serve this country. So thank you.
That's huge. Yeah. Thank you guys for doing that. That's, again, knowing that support is out there is I think huge for current and, past service members.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you share with us and our listeners I know you guys kind of fly under the radar a little bit by design, but if people wanted to look up your company and get a little bit of additional information on you guys, how do they find you?
They can go to either 360privacy.com, or the only social that we're on right now is LinkedIn, and I think we'll probably stay that way for a while.
Okay, awesome. Well, Adam, we really appreciate your time. And hopefully you'll get a little bit of time to maybe relax and to kind of take the day off tomorrow. Maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, we look forward to hearing about your future success, and we'd love to have you back on the show maybe a year from now to hear about what you're up to.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, proudly hosted by Austin Peterson and Landon Mance. Austin and Landon are comprehensive financial planning professionals specializing in financial, estate, and succession planning for small business owners. Austin and Landon have offices in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada, and represent clients in 14 states throughout the country. Join Austin, Landon, and the featured tycoons live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. right here on Business RadioX and your favorite podcast